Hi, welcome to Saunders Sisterhood. I'm Carrie. This is a YouTube channel for the single and childless, not by choice person. Today we're talking about loneliness. One of the questions that I sometimes see people asking others about on like Reddit threads, and sometimes I'm asked it, is you don't have kids, you're not married, aren't you lonely? And I usually answer that question probably just like how anybody else would answer that question, no matter what their circumstance was. But yeah, sometimes I'm lonely and sometimes I'm not. Not very original, but the truth. The reason it's not all that original, because loneliness can happen in a crowd. Loneliness can happen in a relationship. Loneliness can happen in a marriage, especially in a marriage sometimes. Being in a relationship or being in a marriage doesn't mean that you won't be lonely. Having kids doesn't mean that you won't experience loneliness. In fact, it's lonelier being in a marriage that isn't working than it is being single. It can probably feel lonelier when you have kids, but you never see them or you're not on speaking terms with them than if you didn't. But yeah, I do spend more time physically alone than I think other people who have kids, particularly if their kids are at home, and those who are in a relationship or marriage. I am more introvert than extrovert, so this isn't like a torturous thing for me, thankfully. But too much alone time, I can definitely get stuck in my thoughts. I can start making connections that are distorted, meaning I will start to try and make up reasons why I'm alone or why I'm feeling lonely that just aren't true. I'll get stuck in it, I'll perseverate around them. And so when I get into those moods, and even prior to getting into those moods, kind of more proactively, I try and remember some things. And so if you're somebody that experiences loneliness and are single and childless, not by choice, and even if you aren't, here are some things that I try and remember that also might help you. So one of the things that we say a lot in the therapy world, these are not my words, I can't really remember who said them because in the therapy world we just hear it all the time, so it feels like everybody says this, but I know that's not true. But feelings aren't facts, and our brain does a really good job of trying to convince us that our feelings are facts. They are not. So I try and remind myself that my brain is playing a trick on me. When I start to experience loneliness and then I start to create connections that aren't there and start to get stuck in my thoughts, or I'm having thoughts that are negative and just not serving me. So feelings aren't facts, and I remind myself my brain is playing a trick on me. So I also try and remember some of the things that I learned in the book Platonic by Dr. Marissa Franco. If you haven't heard of this book or read this book, we did a book club discussion on it. I'll link that video at the end of this video. But it talks about how to make and keep friends. She gives some really good tips in there. She also talks a little bit about the data and the studies, which I found especially helpful. One of the things that she goes on to say is that most people are lonely. If you're lonely, it's not because of necessarily some inherent flaw in you. It isn't that everybody else is very social, has loads of friends, and you're the only one who doesn't. It isn't some flaw in you. In fact, we're set up in a society and in a culture that doesn't emphasize community, and it's built in ways that as a result of some of the conveniences, we're experiencing less connection and more loneliness. So Dr. Marissa Franco says, loneliness isn't a you problem, but it's a systemic problem. And I say that because I want you to remind yourself of that if you start telling yourself you're lonely because of some inherent flaw in you. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to take action and take some steps to help make it better. But that's the good news. Because it's not some inherent flaw in you, you can take some action steps and make it better. I also try and remind myself that most people want friends. Most people are looking for more connection, especially when we think about what I was just saying, and that most people are lonely. Especially as you get older and you move out of the school years, you know, that thing you go to every day is work. And some people don't like to make friends at work, which I can respect. It just makes it a lot harder to find people. So I always try and remind myself of that, is most people are wanting friends, the idea that someone is going to say, no, I have too many friends, isn't realistic. The other thing I try and do is I also try not to worry about what somebody else is thinking about me. Probably the hardest thing for me to do because I'm constantly thinking about what others are thinking about me. So this one is hard. This is my struggle bus. This will be something I'm continuing to practice for the rest of my life. But when I start to get stuck in that and start to like think about it over and over again, and I get into that thought loop around it, I try and remember one of the things that Dr. Marissa Franco said in Platonic, and she reminded everybody about the liking gap. And the liking gap it was a study that was done, and what they found is that the majority of people way underestimate how much they are liked by others. They way underestimate how people are perceiving them. Essentially, we need to start giving ourselves some credit. When we have that interaction and we're feeling a little bit awkward and we leave the interaction, that's all we can think about. I mean, the data is showing that most likely the person left with the perception of, oh, I liked that person. I try and remember that the idea that that person didn't like me after one interaction is probably not true. That there's something about the human psychology that creates this scenario in which we're most likely going to underestimate how much we're liked. In the book, she really talks about this as likely an evolutionary process, that way back when, we were out trying to hunter and gather and had a lot of like predators around, the idea that we were going to meet somebody new one-on-one was actually probably a very dangerous situation, right? And so we needed to have a lot of shields up and a lot of discernment when we were interacting with somebody because we lived in a more dangerous situation. So I try and remind myself that I'm probably underestimating how much somebody is liking me or what the perception is. And if I'm really struggling to do that, I at least try and stay neutral. So I would encourage you to do that too. Okay, the next thing that I remind myself, and when I say this, I'm even annoying myself a little bit, but it's one of those things that even though it's kind of annoying, it's so true that we just have to accept it and do it. And that is, you do have to initiate. Now, hopefully some of these other things that I've said will help you feel more comfortable or at least help you take the risk to initiate, but we do have to initiate. Friends aren't going to come to us necessarily. We have to get out in the world, we have to go to them, and we have to present ourselves as open. One of the things, I kid you not, that I try and do, and I have to literally tell myself to do, is when I'm out in the world to like lift my head up and make eye contact with people. I like to sort of stay alone or like stay inward, and it doesn't serve me. And I do it without even thinking. I think that's the introvert and the shyness in me. One of the things I do to make that effort is I try and look people in the eye and talk to people. The other thing I do is when I do go out and do things, I try and frame it as not that I'm gonna go out and go make friends. I do it more as I'm gonna go out and go to the dog park because I enjoy doing that. I'm gonna go out and go to the bookstore because I enjoy doing that. I'm gonna go out and go to this talk because I enjoy doing that. I'm gonna go out and go to the park because I enjoy doing that. You get the picture, right? So then if I go out and do that and I don't strike up a conversation with anybody, or I don't meet anybody or make that connection with somebody, then it isn't like, well, that was a total waste. Why would I even do this? See, this is why I don't even do that, because it's a total waste of time. No, I have fun regardless. And if I happen to make a connection with somebody, that's just, icing on the cake, but it isn't my sole purpose for doing it. Okay, so if those things aren't necessarily working and I'm really having some trouble shifting my thoughts, then I try and engage in some skills that are more distracting. These are things that won't necessarily take a lot of brain power and a lot of effort, but they take just enough that they'll occupy my brain enough to where I'm able to distract myself from those thoughts. These thoughts that are not helpful, that are harmful, that are hurting me, and quite frankly, are absolutely not true. So here are some of those things that I like to do. And if there are anything that you like to do in this realm, put them in the comments below because we can never have enough of these. Before I get to those skills, if you are finding value in this video, if you are single and childless, not by choice, or you feel like the content is helpful to you, please subscribe to the channel. All right, so here are the things that I do to help distract my brain just enough to distract it, but not so much that it takes a ton of effort. The first thing is YouTube. I spend a lot of time on YouTube. It's one of the reasons I have a channel, because I really like kind of having an insight into somebody else's life. I like all the education and information. You can learn a lot. You can also just veg out in front of it as well. You know, it has the wide spectrum of things. So depending on my mood, kind of depends on what I'm watching, but you're on YouTube now, so I know you like it. So think about just putting on maybe more of that like background type stuff for YouTube. The other thing that I do a lot is play games on my phone. Bejeweled is one of those. I don't have to think about it. There's like a Tetris type game that I like a lot too. Again, it takes just enough of brain power to distract me, but not enough that I really have to put any effort into it actually whatsoever. I also really like listening to the sound of rain or the sound of ocean waves. I do this a lot at night, like if my brain is starting to swirl when I'm trying to fall asleep. Podcasts can sometimes keep me awake, but having this background noise, it allows my brain to like attach to it, but not so much where it's keeping me awake. Another thing I like to do is color. It's very soothing, it's calming, it's repetitive. Consider coloring. I know this is something many of us stop doing as an adult, but it is one of those things that your brain can just like get into a lull around. Another thing that I try and do is take a walk. And when I do take a walk, I try and really make sure that I'm focusing on the scenery around me. Sometimes taking a walk can just activate my brain. So I'm very intentional about paying attention to where I am. We started the video with me saying feelings aren't facts, and that's exactly where I'm gonna end the video. Feelings aren't facts. Remember, loneliness is a part of life. We all experience it at times, and there are some things we can do in order to help us manage it in a healthy way to kind of prevent that spiral downward that can be really hard to get out of if we're not paying attention to it. So that brings me to the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe to Saunders Sisterhood for more videos for the single and childless, not by choice person. All right, I gotta go get Gavin from daycare. I've missed him all day. See you in the next one.